This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Thank you, Derek. I've got a problem at the moment in that my network connection appears quite slow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow Michelle's instructions and turn off the webcam. Hopefully that's going to make a little bit of difference to you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, as Derek pointed out, the subject I'd like to talk to you about this evening is one of my favourite standards, and I think a very underrated standard, which is ISO 9004. I say it's one of my favourite standards. I'll be explaining the reason behind that during the course of this evening. If it's not a standard that you've heard much about already, then certainly expect to hear a lot about it in the coming months. So let's proceed. As Derek pointed out, basically I run a consultancy company here, Kingsford Consultancy Services. Probably most people will recognize me from my time spent at CQI, where I was indeed head of professional networks. In terms of career, it seems an awfully long one now. The years seem to fly past. But most of it's been spent in sort of ICT management, facilities management, that's crisis management teams, and also in contract management as well. So it's quite a diverse portfolio of functions, both in the public and in the private sector. But one of the constant themes throughout has really been my involvement with standards, either on a domestic level with the British Standards Institute, or on an international level with the ISO. I continue to be involved in the development of quality-related standards. This is sort of TC 176 work. Management audit standards. So here we're looking at the 19,011 and 17021 range. ICT standards, so everything 27,000, and also occupational health and safety, so your 45,000 series standards as well. So it's quite a wide portfolio, really enjoyable work. But the reason I'm speaking to you tonight, really, or the persona I'm speaking to you from, is as a member of TC 176, Subcommittee 2, Ad Hoc Working Group 4, which is quite a long title. But again, I'll explain what that working group is a little bit later on. So essentially, that's a little bit about me. In terms of tonight, we're going to take probably about 40 minutes to an hour looking at the history of 9004, so where this standard fits into the 9000 series. We're going to have a look at its current contents, how's the standard structured, what are some of the key concepts in there, some of the key quality terms and definitions, and how is the standard currently used? What do people use 9004 for? I'll then be asking a bit of a rhetorical question, which is, what's the future direction for this standard? Where are we going with 9004? It's been around for some time, and we'll have a look at the timetable in a second. But it's always been a guidance standard. Okay, it's never contained requirements. It's always a standard that people can opt to comply with, but never certify against. But that could all be about to change. Following that, we've allowed a little bit of time for some questions and answers. And as Derek pointed out, I'll do my best to to pick those up for you. And then what I intend to do is just close the session and hand things back to Derek and Carl to conclude the Wales branch business for this evening. So let's have a look at the 9000 series of standards. 4 primary ones within the series. First of all, ISO 9000, latest edition 2015. What's in here? Well, we've got our quality fundamentals, we've got our principles of quality. There's sort of 7 central pillars of what quality is all about. And we've also got some of the common quality vocabulary. So some of those definitions that are actually used right across all quality standards in the 9000 series, and also in the 10,000 guidance standards that sit behind this series as well. So that's really what 9000 is about. It's setting out the fundamentals. This is at the very, very core of what quality is about. Sitting alongside this, we have 9001, and this is quite simply quality management systems requirements. So essentially, if you're an organization and you're looking to deliver products and services which consistently meet customer expectations, then this standard actually sets out a series of requirements that you are encouraged to follow, which hopefully will deliver that particular outcome. So it's going to, if you do these things, then you've got a good chance of ensuring that your customers are happy people. We have a relatively new standard. I'm surprised it's taken us so long to actually get to this one. This is a technical standard. It's 9002, 2016. And it actually contains guidelines for applying the requirements of 9001. Now, quite often in standards, you'll find that there's the requirements of the standard and maybe a little annex at the back, which contains a bit of guidance. Now, quite often that guidance is about helping you understand what the requirements are. It's not about helping you to understand how to apply that standard. And because we have that gap, TC176 decided we actually need a separate document. We need 9002, and that is going to give some advice to people on how to actually go about applying 9001 from a practical perspective. And then we have 9004, latest edition 2018. Quality management, and this deals with the quality of an organization. We actually will see that we now have a definition of what quality of an organization is. And what this is about is it's guidance to achieve sustained success. So it's recognizing that actually getting your management system to a particular place where it's operating efficiently, it's operating effectively, it's delivering the required outcomes, that's no guarantee of future success. And we see this all around. You can look at organizations that were at the top of the game, people like Nokia, Fujitsu, Kodak, all at the top of the game, all operating really, really well, but they failed to achieve sustained success. And we're going to have a look at what that standard tells us we need to do if we want to not only get to the top of the game, but if we want to stay there. And that's what I really like about this standard. That's why I'm so passionate about it. It's not just a case of achieving excellence. It's we've got there. Let's keep it. Let's keep going. So the two that we're going to look at in particular are these two. If we have a look at a bit of the history, down the left-hand column, we've got the various editions of 9001, and we've got the 9004 editions on the right-hand side. And one of the things to sort of point out is that although 9001 fundamentally has stayed the same, okay, the contents have changed, but it's always been about providing requirements for a quality management system. The purpose of 9004 seems to change at every iteration. So let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. We started off, and some of us may remember this, I certainly do, started off working with BS5750s, British standards, the forerunners to the ISOs. And there were actually 3 of these British standards, so we had parts 1, 2, and part 3. And BS5750 part 1 covered the design, development, making the thing, servicing the thing, and installing the thing. And when I talk about the thing, it was very much products that we were talking about in these days. And the UK developed these standards way back, actually. So we were looking at these standards from sort of the 70s. And what happened with these was the standards were so popular, the British standards, that ISO decided to adopt them. And it literally took them word for word, page for page. So that was really where the origins of 9001 came from. We were looking back in 1987 when these 3 British standards were literally taken by ISO and rebadged as 9001, 9002, and 9003. Then in 1994, we still had these 3 standards, ISO standards, 9001, 2, that should be in 3. And we introduced this concept of preventive action. So for the first time, we had quality management standards that were actually looking at quality assurance rather than dealing with just quality control. A big change in 2000 when we saw the introduction of the process approach, performance metrics, continual improvement, minor change in 2008, and then a big change again in 2015 when we saw Annex SL, risk-based thinking. We saw this new thing called context of the organization. We talked about leadership and we talked about the process approach. So that was what was going on with the requirements side of things. That was our evolution in terms of the requirements. On the right-hand side, we've got the 9004 editions, and you can see to start with, we had 9001, and the same year, we were looking at 9004. And the initial incarnations of 9004 really were to help people improve the performance of their quality management system. So that was as far as it went. The purpose of the standard was simply, you've got 9001, how can we improve its performance? And that was the focus of 9004. But in 2009, we got a bit of a sea change. And instead of having this standard, which was just looking at improving the performance of the 9001 system, we started to talk about sustained success of organizations. So moving to build a better QMS to achieve sustained success. And the latest edition of 2018 is very much in that vein. It's all about really, let's take a holistic view of the organization and make that organization better. ISO 9001 seen very much as the diamond in the ISO portfolio. 900,000 certificates hanging on walls, 1.2 million sites covered, adopted in 190 countries. I think there's only about 196 officially recognized countries. So pretty much anywhere you go, you'll find a 9001 certificate somewhere in the country. Demand's still growing. It's a mature standard, but it's still growing. Right across industrial sectors. So here we have a set of requirements that's applied across a really diverse range of industries. And for ISO, it's a huge income generator. And actually, for us, the whole industry, the whole quality industry, it's a massive generator. It's income for training providers. It's income for audit organizations. It's an income generator for, as I say, for ISO. There's a whole lot of vested interest in 9001. And every time that 9001 changes, the cash registers start ringing again, because consultants will start to get involved. We need to retrain our auditors. So it's a massive cash generating standard. Look at 9004. Well, not quite the same. The first thing is, because it's not a standard you can register against, we don't know how many certificates there are out there. We've got no idea of how many organizations actually operate this. No idea of the sites or which countries are using it, or whether it's popular or unpopular, and we don't know how much income it generates. 9004 is actually seen as very much the poor relation, certainly from a fiscal perspective, to 9001. So let's have a look in a little bit more detail about the contents of 9004. Most management system standards contain a diagram which is a little bit like this. So what we have is we have inputs to the system on the left, in this case customer and relevant parties' needs and expectations, and we have outputs from the system on the right. So the output we're seeking to generate from applying 9004 is confidence. It's confidence in the organization's ability to meet customer and other relevant interested parties' needs and expectations, not just now, but going forwards as well. So we're looking to generate this confidence that the organization is continually going to deliver, not just at this moment in time. If we have a look at the top section of this diagram, we can see context of the organization. Context of the organization is something that was brought into the latest, is something which applies in sort of Annex SL. And essentially it's made up of two components. First thing is it's made up of the views of stakeholders, their needs and expectations. And secondly, it's made up of the internal and external issues that the organization faces. So essentially, when you see context of the organization in respect of the standard, it's in there to ensure that the people that are operating that particular management system recognize that the management system doesn't operate in isolation from the rest of the world, but actually operates in conjunction with the rest of the world. So it's about taking an external perspective as well as an internal perspective. Dropping down, we see clause 6 of the standard talks about the identity of an organization. And what it says is that the identity of an organization is comprised of 4 elements: its mission, its vision, its values, and its culture. And those 4 things together will define the identity, how that organization looks to the outside world. We'll look at that in a second in a bit more detail. In the middle section of the diagram, we've got leadership. And in all of the management system modules, you'll actually see leadership sat in the middle. And the reason for that is because leadership essentially drives the system. If you haven't got effective leadership, then the system is going to fail. When we talk about leadership, we're looking at not just top management, but we're talking about leadership at all levels. Within clause 7, leadership functions, the leadership of the organization needs to define what the strategy of the organization is. It needs to define what its objectives are, and it also needs to set policy. We then get into a little bit more detail. We start to talk about process management. 9004 prescribes again a process approach. So it says if your organization is going to be successful, you need to understand the processes that are operating within the business, and you need to understand their relationship to each other and their interactions. Okay. You need to deliver your processes under controlled conditions. You need to manage process risk, and you need some sort of test on process at key points to ensure that that process is delivering its intended outcomes, its intended results. Clause 9 of 9004 talks about resources. So all types of resources. It actually talks about financial resources. It talks about people, knowledge, infrastructure, so buildings, the work environment, information, raw materials. And what the standard says is what we need to do is we need to control these resources. We need to manage them. We need to use them effectively. We shouldn't be wasting these things. Clause 10 talks about performance analysis and evaluation. This is all about the organization being self-aware. So it collects data, it analyzes it, it evaluates it. So by evaluation, it asks, what is this data telling me? It makes decisions based on data. It carries out audits, it carries out reviews, it listens to the news, and it adapts itself as a result of these things. And clause 11 talks about improvement, but not just improvement as you might see in 9001. It talks about improvement and learning and innovation. And it tells us that if our company wants sustained success, it's not good enough just to make the odd improvement here, but we actually need to actively learn from all of these things that are going on both within the business and external to the business. And we need to use this learning to inform innovation, to change our products, to develop new products, to move into new markets. So those are the key clauses in 9004, and hopefully you can see how those bits fit together. Now, as I say, there's a couple of really key definitions within this standard. One of the things it talks about is the quality of an organization, and there's a definition, the degree to which the inherent characteristics, so how the organization looks and operates, fulfills the needs and expectations of its customers and other interested parties in order to achieve sustained success. So in the view of the stakeholders, does that organization seem to be doing the correct things? And if it does, it's a quality organization. What this tells us is the organization needs to go beyond the quality of products and services and the needs and expectations of its customers. But if it's really going to achieve sustained success, it needs to focus on anticipating and meeting the needs and expectations of all of its interested parties with the intent of enhancing their satisfaction and overall experience. So we're not just in the business of making our customers happy bunnies. We're here to meet the needs and expectations of all our interested parties. And that, of course, creates a problem. Or some would say a challenge. The needs and expectations of interested parties are not mutually consistent. Okay. Different groups, different stakeholders will want different things. The board may want maximum growth. Top management may want measured growth, but maximum profitability. Staff may want maximum wages. But that's at odds with the board, with the top management making profits. So we have all these stakeholder groups with different needs and expectations. And the challenges for top management, and it's down as a top management responsibility, to balance these expectations, to manage and maintain these. And this is an exercise, unfortunately, that needs to happen not just once, but on a regular basis, because the needs and expectations of these groups will change through time. So it's not good enough just to do a one-off stakeholder evaluation exercise. It needs to be reviewed. So that's the quality of an organization. The second key definition, and we talked about this earlier, is the identity of an organization. And what the standard tells us is this is the result of the interaction between four factors. The identity of the organization depends on its mission, its vision, its values, and its culture, and the interrelationship between those four elements. The mission is the organization's reason for achieving, for existing. The vision, what the organization would like to become. That's the aspirational thing. The values. So these are our principles. These are our how should we act? And then we have the culture, which is the observed behaviors and the attitude. The way we do things around here is sometimes used as a term to describe that. So how do these four things fit together? And what the standard says is, for sustained success, it's imperative that all four of these things are aligned. Okay, and it says it's top management responsibility to ensure this happens. So if you want the organization as a vision to be the best at making shoes in the world, and your culture is that people come in at 10 o'clock in the morning and stay maybe for 15 minutes and then have a tea break, those are not consistent. That's not going to give you sustained success. What you need is everything in alignment. So let's have a look. As I mentioned before, 9004, it's always been a guidance standard. So it's not something you can certify against it. If somebody claims that they've got a certificate against 9004, and you do see this thing on the internet, that's not possible. You can't do that. But one thing that is in there is an Annex A. And that Annex A is a self-assessment tool. And that can be used by organizations to determine the maturity level of the organization in respect of its ability to achieve sustained success. The more mature the organization and the more effectively and efficiently it performs, the greater is its probability of sustained success. So what the self-assessment tool allows us to do is it allows us to effectively rate our organization on 5 levels, with level 1 being the lowest. It's a base level, to level 5, which is where the organization is seen to be adopting best practice in a particular area. So we've got these, 1 is the lowest level, it's a base level, just sort of muddling along. And level 5 is this organization is actually delivering best practice in this area. And to allow us to make this judgment as to which of these areas the organization falls into, the standard provides us with some criteria. And the criteria allow you to determine which level you're at by the collection of evidence. And typically that evidence would be through activities such as internal audit or a periodic review or performance data. So it's very much an evidence-based system. Now what the standard says is that the criteria themselves and the way that you apply those are not fixed. So it's giving you this framework, it's giving you this model, but it says if you really want to, and you don't like criteria 7.3, change it. Make it meaningful for your organization. Okay. Now clearly that's got implications for what I'm about to say in a couple of minutes' time. But at the moment, the current version of the standard actually encourages you to customize the model so it works for your organization. Here's one of the sub-clauses taken out of the standard to illustrate how this criteria set works. So here we have external and internal issues. So we're thinking about how well does the organization deal with what's going on in the outside world, and how does it deal with what's going on within the business, internal to the business. We have the 5 levels, and we have criteria for each of those levels. So for an organization to have achieved level 1, all it needs to be doing is have processes for determining and addressing external and internal issues which are informal or ad hoc. So it could simply be a case of, oh, Dave, did you see the news yesterday? There's going to be a change in legislation that's going to impact us. We need to do something about it. If that's the extent of the process, there's nothing else behind that, you would qualify the organization as a level 1 organization. But as things get a little bit more structured, we can move up these maturity levels. So to qualify for a level 2, now we need processes for determining and addressing issues to be in place, but we also need to be considering risks and opportunities related to these issues. We're determining these, and again, this could be informal, it could be ad hoc, but at least we're thinking about risks and opportunities. For level 3, we've now got processes to determine internal issues that can affect the organization's ability to achieve sustained success. So specifically now, rather than looking at all internal issues in some sort of huge jumble in an ad hoc way, we're specifically focusing on any internal issues that can affect our sustained success. And we're identifying those. And we're also identifying external issues that can do the same. So hopefully, I'm not going to read through all of these. Hopefully you can see how the criteria sets work. We start off at level 1, which in a sense is an organization which is struggling to understand itself. And we move through these maturity levels to maturity level 5, where we've got an organization which is really switched on. It has the processes in place, it understands what's going on, and it acts upon those findings. As I said, there are many of these criteria sets that you need to look at, and within the current standard, these are they. I think there's 31 areas there. So I'm just going to pick out a few of these. The sort of things that you would look at are interested parties, policy and strategy. You're going to be looking at your processes, how processes work. You're going to be looking at your resource management. You're going to be looking at your performance indicators, internal audit, your improvement, your learning, and your innovation. So a whole range of areas where you will be making judgments as to whether you are at level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I'm just going to fill in this scorecard for you. So I've been around the organization, I've done a full Annex A assessment, I've looked at all of these areas, and those are my scores. So if we look down towards the bottom right hand side of the screen, second box up, in terms of 1s, which are sort of pretty naives, we haven't got any, so that's great news. In terms of level 2s, I've got 1. And if I have a look at the screen, I can see that's against people in column 2, 9.2. So I'm struggling with the people area. I'm not meeting the criteria as well as I would like to. 3s, I've got 9. 4s, I've got 17. And 5s, I've got 4. So that gives me the 31 areas. Now, in terms of how you would grade that organization overall, it might come as a bit of a surprise, but it might not. You're actually looking at a level 2 organization there. And the reason for that is the level is driven by the lowest score in the criteria. So you could have, in a sort of a ridiculous situation, 30 scores of 5 and a score of 1, and you will be a level 1. And that's simply because of the way that the system is operated. In terms of displaying that, there are lots of different ways of displaying the information. Radar charts is one of the most popular. And again, this is quite a good way of seeing very, very quickly which areas you're showing some deficiencies in. So whenever I've got a blue line touching the orange circle, I'm operating best practice. I'm at maturity level 5. And in the perfect organization, that blue shape would actually completely overlay the orange circle. In my business, looking at this, I can see down towards the bottom of the screen, I'm struggling a little bit in some aspects of process management. Certainly my resource management's not good, and my performance evaluation is pretty weak as well. My leadership's not bad. My improvement's reasonable as well. But I've got some real issues around the operational stuff, the management of processes, and the management of resources. So again, that's a good visual indication of where you need to direct some improvement effort. So that's a little bit about the standard as it currently sits. 9004, excuse me, standard tells us that self-assessment is a tool that you should use to determine the strengths and weaknesses of your organization, as well as its best practices. So this is how we need to use the standard. It'll help you find what you're doing well, also what you're doing not quite so well, and it'll help you to focus your efforts on those. It says self-assessment should be both at an overall level, but you can also do it at the level of individual processes as well if you want to. And self-assessment should be used to assist organizations to prioritize, to plan and implement improvements and innovations where necessary. So it's very much about, here is something that you can use yourself, apply to your organization, pull out some real quality learning, compare yourself against best practice, and then come up with some plans to move those areas where perhaps you're not currently exhibiting best practice to allow you to move towards that achievement. So a little bit more about this long title group that I mentioned to start with. So ISO TC176, if you see 176, it means quality. SC2 is subcommittee 2, and AHG means an ad hoc group. So this is a group that's been set up for a special purpose, a little mini project. It's been told to go away and come back with some answers. So the group met for the first time very recently. We met in March, and there were delegates from 14 national standards bodies, plus 5 liaison organisations. A liaison organisation is an organisation which is considered important enough in terms of what it does, and also the quality of its submissions to have its views considered when new standards are developed. You have to apply to be a liaison organisation. Not all organisations are accepted. In fact, the majority are not accepted. but certainly the CQI holds liaison status with many ISO committees. So we're right there, we're actually in the room with these national standards bodies when we're developing the standards, and that means we can have a direct input. So what we were asked to do is we were asked to consider the future for 9004. And we were given 4 options to think about. The first one was, well, do nothing, just leave it as a guidance standard. The second one was, well, actually leave 9004 as a guidance standard, but let's create a new document to sit alongside it, and we'll call it 9004/1 or something similar. And actually, that is going to be a requirement standard. So there'll be some stuff in there that you have to do if you're going to want to claim conformance against ISO 9004. The third option was create a hybrid 9004. So under option 3, we only have the one document, but the first part of that document sets out requirements, and the second part of that document sets out guidance. Or option 4, change the whole thing to a requirement standard. So throughout its history, it's been guidance. Let's make it a requirement standard with all that that brings. So in making that decision, we were asked to consider a few points. First one was, well, how is this going to impact 9001? Because actually what we're doing here is we're creating a second QMS requirement standard. No one's suggesting that 9001 is thrown out, that it suddenly doesn't exist. But what we're now saying is we've got 9001 containing requirements, albeit requirements for a quality management system. And now we've got ISO 9004 containing requirements in respect of sustained success. Second thing to consider, well, all new management system standards need to adopt the structure of Annex SL. Annex SL being the standard writers standard, the rules for actually structuring standards. So one of the considerations that we are thinking about at the moment is how easy is it going to be to actually translate the current 9004 structure to the structure of Annex SL? And there are some similarities because we looked at 4 being context and 5 being leadership. But then we start to drift a bit because Annex SL, we've got 6 planning, and we have a different structure that lies behind 9004. We have identity of an organization being 6 in 9004. So some similarities, some differences. It's not going to be a sort of a shoehorn job. There's a massive question around revising existing certification practices. Okay, suddenly we've got a whole new requirement standard. We're going to need CB auditors to be able to audit against 9004 potentially, and all that involves. We're going to need IRCA to be running ISO 9004 lead auditor training courses. You know, massive implications if this is to happen for the whole of the certification industry. Is it going to be possible, if we do decide to do this, to simply convert the existing 9004 edition into a new requirement standard, or do we have to effectively start to write this thing again? Is it simply a case of changing all of the shoulds in the guidance standard to musts No, would be the argument around that one. And are sufficient resources available to do this, given that there was talk about ISO 9001 revision actually kicking off this year? Now, for some extent, this news is already out there, and I'm sure the CQI will be releasing something very shortly about this. So I'm not going to get into this last point. But what I would say is that certainly my role in terms of this particular project is very much focused on the third of these particular points, which is around the impact on certification. So that's going to be my primary role as a member of this working group. So in terms of timeline, the next meeting that we've got is on May the 6th. Each of the ad hoc groups has been asked to do some preliminary work in terms of whether we think this is a good idea or whether really it's a non-starter. There's going to be further work conducted during the year in terms of feasibility. But what I would say is there actually does appear to be quite a lot of support for option 4, which is whole hog change 9004 to a requirement standard. So what we'll be doing is our task is by the end of this year, sometime during Q4, submit a recommendation to TC176 as to whether or not we think this should happen. Is there a demand for this? Is this something which 9004 stakeholders want, would value, or is this simply just a step too far? And that decision, that recommendation, as I say, will be made to TC176 in the last quarter of this current year. So back to the title, Future Direction, Understudy to Starring Role. For me, it's always been something of a mystery as to why a standard that's aimed at securing sustained success was produced as guidance. You know, if we're looking, what we want is surely we want all organisations to achieve sustained success. So why did we go down the guidance route in the first place? History tells us that any organisation that fails to achieve sustained success will cease trading. Well, I gave some examples earlier. We talked about the Kodaks, Nokia coming back, but nowhere near where it was, Fujitsu. You know, there are many companies that were at the top of their game that failed to innovate and that died as a result. And whilst 9001 can provide the foundations for a great quality management system, my argument would be that 9004 can actually provide the foundations for a great business. It's a business-wide solution. So I'm very much in the quarter of I want this to happen. I would like to see this happen. I think it will be a good move. But I do recognise that there are many questions that lie between now and us getting to that point, and not a little challenge to overcome as well. So thank you, Derek. That's it from me in terms of the presentation, and I'm very happy to hand back to you at this point.
Okay, Alan McBain now is going to deal with any questions and answers. Alan, can you?
Yeah, absolutely, Derek. So we have obviously got the chat function open. If anybody has any questions, then by all means pop them into there, and I'll just kind of try and keep them in some kind of semblance of order, especially if we have lots of chat going on around them at the same time. So Richard, I'm going to kick off with a question of my own that I'll stick into there. And if everybody can just have a ponder on what you might want to add into the discussion, please.
Okay, we're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, I'll maybe come off camera, certainly. So Richard, well, by all means, take Estelle's one question first. So Estelle was asking, given that any change will take many years, do you think that there may be interest in having non-accredited assessment by competent consultancies?
Yes, I mean one of the things that was quite popular amongst a particular group that had been assigned to look at this exercise was actually that sort of middle ground. So it was let's get consultants in to carry out those assessments rather than the certification bodies per se. My feeling is that the majority of people aren't really in that particular camp. The majority of the people, certainly on my particular subgroup, are very much in favour of this being operated by CBs. So what we would see essentially is we'd see the consultants going in and helping to establish the systems, and also perhaps carry out, as they do at the moment, some initial audits, some initial assessments prior to the actual CB assessments. And I think that was where the appetite really lies at the moment, as opposed to any other form of assessment mechanism. I'm sorry, I'm just getting a message that somebody is talking, but I'm not getting any sound through.
Sorry, that was I muted myself as well as taking the camera off, so that wasn't really very helpful, was it? I was saying that Ian's, I think in order of these things, Ian's question is probably the most logical one to take next, and we'll take some of the others. So quality isn't the only factor to sustain success. How will ISO 9004 cover social value and sustainability like the revised EFQM model?
That will come in, excuse me, at clause 4, which is where we're considering the context of the organisation. So, as I say, the context includes the needs and expectations of all stakeholders, not just the customer. So anyone that has a stake in that organisation, the organisation will be expected to listen to and to factor into their decisions what that particular group are seeking. So that will be the route into the model. Based on the decisions that were made, that would impact the identity of the organisation, which is covered under clause 6. So it might help to shape its mission or its vision.
Okay, thank you. I think that Keith and I have asked kind of slightly related questions. I'm going to put the two of them together, I think, and because it's about the relationship between 9001 and 9004. So I was basically saying that given, especially now, given that 9001, you're telling us is kicking off its revision, and it's why wouldn't we simply incorporate some of these existential requirements that 9004 rather, sorry, 9004 is talking about, that longer term vision and sustainability in organizational terms. Why wouldn't we just incorporate those into the next version of 9001? And what Keith is basically saying is, do you see a couple of certification levels? So maybe a more basic 9001 and a superior 9004, so that they're not two, maybe not two separate standards, but they are they're going to ask the same thing, but maybe go to different levels. I mean, Ajay's coming in saying that people do sometimes want a higher standard than 9001 is giving. So is that a route that was at all considered, or,
Yes.
or is that something that can now be considered given whatever may come out of your working group and maybe feed into the 9001 considerations?
Yeah, certainly been considered. They've talked about this sort of two-level 9001, and then if you want to do 9004, they're saying, well, maybe you need 9001 as a prerequisite for that. That's one of the suggestions. So that gives you a sort of two-level. Why it's not included? That's an interesting one. I mean, there was another group set up within TC176 that were actually looking at future concepts, and their remit was to look at, what is going on not just now, but what is going on in sort of the next 5 years or 10 years that actually will impact our understanding of quality and what the needs and expectations of stakeholders are, so that could potentially be brought into the 9000 series of standards. So there was that piece of work done in terms of future concepts. As I say, do not be surprised, because one of the outcomes from is work going to start on 9001 this year. One of the potential outcomes is no. And if that's the case, the situation you'll be in is that you will not see a substantive revision of that standard for some time yet.
Okay.
As I say, that's one of the possible outcomes. It's not necessarily the outcome, but certainly the 9004 people thought it was time to push forward with this one.
Okay, thanks. Interesting. I'm not seeing any more questions come through. I've kind of asked questions on behalf of everybody. I appreciate that. I mean, just because of the ordering of things. But does everybody who has submitted questions feel that they've got the answers in the way that I've kind of summarised things? Please shout.
Sorry, I'm just going to. I haven't submitted a chat question, but if possible, I'm just going to speak it out.
Yeah.
And this is what the sort of question that I'm going to say, Alan, that with a standard like this, you will have to have built-in guards, because if you're virtually going to guarantee sustainable success, and a company fails to get that sustainable success, not to mention a very controversial American president whose university guaranteed a wealthy outcome had to pay £20 million in compensation because schools failed to deliver. There is that side to it as well.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Derek. I rather suspect we will see a change in title of this standard. Yes.
Interesting. Does anybody else? I was just going to say, does anybody else have any questions they'd like to just ask verbally? I'm not hearing anybody shouting. Can I just ask? It's a kind of slightly related question, Richard. It's not directly though, but I work for the civil service, obviously very much a service organisation, and we keep coming up all the time. We have been through all the training we have done around 9001, coming up against but of course it was designed for heavy industry, it was designed for industry, and it doesn't really translate across. And yeah, it's fine. Honestly, it does work. Honest gov, it's perfect. It does. So if we're going to go and look at maybe changing what 9001 does, 9004 does, or any other thing in the 9X universe, has consideration been given to considering how it could better service industries, which, as we know, in the UK is now the vast majority of the economy.
Absolutely. The short answer to that, I believe, is yes. I would need to, before I could give you 100% answer on that, I would need to double check the findings of the future concept group, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Certainly in terms of appropriateness to small and medium-sized businesses, definitely yes. In respect of services, whether they have teased out the need to do anything over and above what's been done at the present, I don't know. I mean, certainly, as you'll remember, if you go back to the 5750, it was all product. And then we got to the stage where there's a definition which said for product, read product and services. And then we finally got the same product and services. So we're sliding that way ever so gently. But I would need to check with the future concepts as to whether there's any sort of seismic shift. That said, I think the requirements are probably written at a level now where they can reasonably be applied to the service sector. I'm struggling to find anything which jumps out and says, well, that's very much hit it with a hammer.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that some of it, in some ways, from my perspective, has been about the training more than anything else. It's not that it doesn't fit or we've not been able to make things fit, but when you are getting to you're going through the training and everything like that, an awful lot of that is still focused on industry, and that might be just the training providers and partners that we've used, but it does seem to be there does still seem to be a kind of legacy position towards that. At least that's what I have found in kind of taking people through this over the past few years.
I think that's a very fair comment, and I think, you know, I mark quite a lot of CQI learning courses, and invariably when we get to the section on process, it's either a pair of cogs meshing together, or it is a hammer, or it's a production line picture that's in there, rather than someone interacting with someone else over a counter or a different environment. So I think you're absolutely right there in terms of how we portray this being an issue. It's perhaps the issue.
I see that IG has also asked about when there's final decision on 944 will be made.
That is going to be Q4 of this year, so we're way off it at the moment, which is good, because what it means is that we'll have plenty of time for the CQI and the CQI membership to put forward its views on this, and that's what I'll be pushing Alex to help us deliver, and I'm sure Alex will support that.
Okay then, I think, Alan, we'll call it a day now with questions and answers. I'd just like to thank Richard for a very good and excellent presentation, overcoming some of your problems with the sound, but it was a very good topic and very interesting, and I really feel that there is definitely a need to have a standard that could help to sustain businesses, as we've all seen, as you say, especially mentioning those companies like Vodafone and Kodak that were massive companies and lost out tremendously financially because they didn't take that into account. So I think it's would be a great standard if it was worded in the right way. So thanks again, Richard, for that. That was a great presentation.
My pleasure.
Before I ask Carl, our secretary, to give some announcements about the future, I'd like to thank Michelle as well for hosting this. She's always does a great job for us, so I'd just like to mention Michelle and thank her for all her efforts. Okay, Carl, can you just tell us about any future events?
Yes, Derek, will do. Yeah, first of all, though, I'd like to say that if anyone would want to have a CBD certificate, if they could put into chat that they would want one, and obviously I'll arrange that for them. The next event for the Wales branch is going to be a mini online conference on the 3rd of July, on a Saturday, between 9:15 and 11 a.m. in the morning. And we've got two speakers. Jeff Green is going to do the main seminar, which is going to be on the Information Security System Standard, ISO 27001. Jeff is a very good speaker, and he's worked with SGS, the certification body, carrying out training of auditors and senior management in organizations to understand standards, and he's given us quite a few talks in the past, so it should be a good talk from him. And we're also having Professor Gareth Thomas, who's Professor of Law at the University of Glamorgan, and he's going to give a 10 minutes talk on Brexit developments and how it will affect us on the legal front. So please come and join that mini conference, as I say, which should be online.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for attending. And if you've got any queries or if you'd like to contact us, then please do so. So I'd call it a day now and just thank you all for attending.
Carl, looks like you're getting a few requests for CPD.
Yeah, I'm just going to take. That's why I'm staying on. I'm going to take all the names down to and obviously getting across to you, Michelle, once I produce them. Okay.
Okay, that's brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Right.
How many, Carl? How many, Carl, asking for CPDs?
I haven't totaled it yet. There were 19 attendees in all. Quite a few hand, didn't they? So there's a few. So 1, 2.
So there's about 8 or 9 in the chart there.
3, yeah, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, about 8 or 9, something like that. So.
If you put me down as well, I haven't mentioned it, but put me down.
Yeah, no problem. Will do.
Did Basim has Basim applied for one?
Hold on. Yes.
Oh, that's good. And what about Alistair Haig?
He doesn't mention it.
Not as far as I can see. Okay. No. Can you not see the chat, Derek? No.
Right. Okay. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. That was. I think that went off okay. Yeah.
I think it went well.
And everybody is. Sorry.
We're still recording. You probably want to cut this bit off the end, Michelle.
Yeah. Okay.